In 80 years of shared history, no American president had ever said those words about Great Britain. Not during Vietnam, when Britain stayed out. Not during Iraq, when the relationship was tested. Not once. Until now. I'm not here to take sides. I'm here to give you the facts, because what is happening right now between Washington and London is one of the most significant shifts in Western foreign policy in a generation, and most Americans are not getting the full picture. Stay with me for the next 7 minutes, because this affects your economy, your security, and the world your children are going to inherit. To understand where we are today, we need to go back 18 months, because this story did not begin with a single crisis. It built, slowly and steadily, like pressure in a pipe. In May 2025, Britain did something no other country had managed. On the 80th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day, President Trump and Prime Minister Starmer announced a historic trade deal, the first the Trump administration had signed with any country. It was celebrated on both sides of the Atlantic. The special relationship, people said, was alive and well. But under the surface, the foundations were already shifting. And by the spring of 2026, what had looked like a partnership was starting to look like a pressure test, and the pressure was winning. The May 2025 deal looked strong on paper. 25% tariffs had been imposed by the US on British steel, aluminum, and automotive goods, and the UK was desperate for relief and special status. Britain got some of it. The UK became the first country to secure a trade deal with the Trump administration. Car exports got a reduced tariff rate, pharmaceuticals were later protected. British officials called it a win. But here's what the headlines didn't tell you.
The deal was more of a starter pack. Numerous commitments, but less comprehensive than a traditional trade agreement, with most of the details still to be worked out. A 10% baseline tariff remained on most British goods. Tech deal negotiations were suspended by the US side in December 2025. Britain had shown extraordinary loyalty and received, in return, a framework with no finish line. Think of it this way. Imagine you negotiate a contract with a business partner. They give you a partial agreement, suspend the tech component, and then tell you the rest is still being figured out. You have to ask yourself, am I a partner or am I a supplicant? The real breaking point came in late February 2026, and it had nothing to do with trade. The US entered into military conflict with Iran and expected allied participation. Trump called for British involvement. Starmer declined, calling it not our war.
That single refusal escalated into the most visible diplomatic dispute between Washington and London in recent memory. Now, before you form an opinion, consider what Starmer actually said. He wasn't anti-American. He was specific. Starmer told the House of Commons he was not prepared for the United Kingdom to join a war that doesn't have a plan. He later allowed American planes to use British bases for defensive missions, protecting civilians and allies in the region. He drew a line at offensive strikes. Trump's response was immediate and personal. "This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with," Trump said at the White House, blasting Britain's reluctance to let US warplanes use its bases for offensive operations. He called Britain uncooperative. He said the relationship was very sad. He later compared Starmer to Neville Chamberlain. Here is the political reality that every American voter should understand.
Britain sent 457 soldiers to die in Afghanistan alongside American forces. It has been the cornerstone of NATO for 75 years. It is a Five Eyes intelligence partner, meaning it shares its most sensitive national security information with Washington every single day. When Trump claimed NATO allies stayed a little back from the front lines in Afghanistan, Starmer called the comments insulting and frankly appalling. He was right to do so, and the facts backed him up. Calling that ally not Churchill because they won't join a conflict they believe lacks a clear plan, that is not how you treat a partner. That is how you lose one. Here is the part of this story that the American public is largely not hearing, because it is happening quietly in diplomatic meetings and trade working groups, not in viral social media posts. Britain is hedging, carefully, professionally, but unmistakably. In June 2025, Canada and the UK established a new economic and trade working group, committing to deepen their trading relationship across critical minerals, AI infrastructure, and digital trade. The UK is now Canada's third largest global trading partner, with two-way trade valued at $85 billion in 2025. In May 2025, the UK and EU held a summit where they agreed to strengthen cooperation, including alignment on agricultural standards, a direct reversal of the post-Brexit divergence from Europe that Washington had quietly encouraged. Starmer has said he sees Britain's future as more aligned with Europe, a statement that would have been politically unthinkable in London just 2 years ago. A recent Ipsos poll found that nearly 70% of British people no longer believe in the special relationship. That number is not a footnote. It is a verdict, delivered not by politicians, but by the British public. Britain is not abandoning America, but it is building alternatives.
And in geopolitics, when a close ally starts building alternatives, it means they no longer feel certain the original relationship will hold. Here is the analytical point that I believe matters most, and you won't hear it framed this way on cable news. The United States has historically derived enormous strategic advantage from being at the center of a trusted alliance network. That advantage is not just military. It is economic, it is diplomatic, it is the ability to pick up the phone and have decisions made within hours because the relationships are deep, tested, and real. That network is not built overnight. It took 80 years of shared sacrifice, shared intelligence, and shared values to construct, and it is significantly easier to damage than it is to repair. A year ago, Britain was America's most cooperative partner, the first to sign a trade deal, maintaining good relations, despite real political differences between Starmer and Trump. And it is significantly easier to damage than it is to repair.
Today, the UK's growth forecast has been revised downward by the IMF. The trade deal is under threat, and the bilateral relationship is in its most visible crisis in decades. The question is not whether Starmer is Churchill or Chamberlain. The question is whether Washington is making decisions that strengthen or weaken the alliances it will need, not just today, but for the next 50 years. History answers that question clearly. Great powers do not decline because their enemies grow stronger. They decline because they exhaust their friends. Let me be direct with you before I close. This video is not an argument for Britain. It is not an argument against America. It is an argument for clarity, because informed citizens make better decisions than citizens who are only given one side of a story. The special relationship is under real, documented, verifiable strain. The causes are real, the consequences are real.
And the direction it goes from here will depend, in part, on whether the American public understands what is actually at stake. You now have the facts. What you do with them, that is yours to decide. If this analysis gave you something to think about, share it with someone who would benefit from seeing it. And subscribe to this channel, because next week we are going to look at how the rest of America's alliances are shifting, what it means for your economy, and what history tells us about how this kind of moment usually ends. I'll see you then.